A couple revelations there, and also the depth chart came out for the first time. Let's start with the injury news. Nick Bowers, a promising young tight end, is done for the season. James didn't talk about the injury, but it definitely affects tight end depth.
No question, Bob. You can think back to the spring when Brent Wilkerson was let go. He was a guy that probably wasn't going to play that much anyway, but he was one piece of the puzzle potentially. Mm-hmm. Now you lose Nick Bowers as well. He was a guy I thought, obviously they liked him a lot because they went and got him from Pittsburgh late in the recruiting process. So I think it's a little bit of a blow because there's not much experience behind him. He wasn't experienced either, but I think he was at the top of the pecking order.
People always want to talk about Penn State's true freshmen. We know that Miles Sanders and Blake Gilligan and Connor McGovern has been designated to play this year. They're called greens in the Penn State coding system. James Franklin touched on 4 yellows, 4 true freshmen who aren't necessarily expected to play, but if anything happens, they'll be elevated to playing status in 2016. You're 4?
Absolutely. Shane Simmons, obviously a guy that I think we thought would be green, quite honestly. Will Freeze was another one, an offensive lineman that could play. Michael Menet, of course. So you're talking about 3 potential freshman offensive linemen playing at one time. And then the 4th is a guy that I think is pretty interesting, Cam Brown. We saw him with the Big 33 game. He's really lengthy, and it goes back to the fact that the linebacker depth just is not that good. So they have to have a guy like that ready to go.
One thing to note about Menet, he's running second team on the depth chart behind Ryan Bates. That's where they have him to start. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up. And finally, the depth chart itself. I thought a couple of interesting, things that you really didn't expect. At the end of spring, Greg, Noah Bay was the first team right tackle. He's AWOL on the depth chart. It's going to be Andrew Nelson on the right side and Brendan Mann on the left side. Also, Curtis Cothran, the project who was going to go from end defensive tackle, also did not show up at defensive tackle. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was interesting. He talked at the end, James Franklin did, about Antoine White. They sort of hinted at the fact that they maybe messed up the way they were doing his weight, and they had to get him way back up to speed. I think that's why Kevin Givens is starting and not him. Wonder if Cothran had the same sort of deal where the weight didn't go the way they wanted it to, so now he's rebounding. I don't know, but he's not even on the depth chart, and that just is just odd to me. Same with Noah Bay.
Yeah, and he's 6'4", 6'5". It's hard to play defensive tackle when you're that lanky.
Right.
People can get at your legs. I just wonder if maybe he might be better suited at defensive end. One other thing, just in the return game, people want to know about Saquon Barkley and Miles Sanders and possible use on kick returns because Penn State really doesn't have any explosive players. They didn't last year. They didn't in 2014. James touched on that as well.
Definitely. Greg Garrity is currently the starting punt returner. Again, what we heard last year was that he's the only guy that could consistently catch punts.
A lot of fair catches coming,
I think, fair catches. But they want to. I think the goal is to get Nick Scott, to get Mark Allen potentially, to get Miles Sanders, of course, and Saquon Barkley in that job, in that role as kick returning and punt returning. You saw Nick Scott at the top of the kick returners list. I think it's just a matter of consistency, especially in the punting game. Penn State's not going to be able to afford to give up defensive possessions this year in some of the games they're going to be in against a pretty fairly decent schedule of opponents and give the ball back on punts.
All right, that's a wrap for now.